Welcome back to painting your Terminator captain from the Combat Patrol magazine. In this one, we're going to go over how to paint the silver metallics or steel metallics. I'm going to show you off the paints and the equipment I'm going to need first. I'm going to use Storm Vermin Fur as a base coat, but any dark grey will do. Or slightly different way of doing it. You can go straight to leadbelcher, but I'm going to be using this as a first layer highlight. Stormhouse Silver will be my final highlight. I'm going to need to pick up a mummified grime from Army Painter. It's a Speedpaint. You can also use Rattling grime for this one from Games Workshop, a contrast paint. Lamian Medium, because we're going to make that Speedpaint into a wash. My normal painting setup, I've got my tissue and palette. I'm going to use my not roughing out brush. My normal detail brush, it's just a cheap mass-produced acrylic brush. And for the first time in the series, I'm going to do some dry brushing. For that, I'm going to need my texture palette and a cheapy little makeup brush. The first thing I'm going to want to do is take my Storm Vermin Fur and apply all the areas that should be steel or silver with this colour. Just going to use, it's a layer paint, so I only need to use water to do this. So that hood. And remember, we don't have to paint the areas that are black, but we are going to go into it. This will need a couple of coats. Inside of the hood should be black. I can see the blues coming through that grey already. So use a handy colour reference. The magazine is more than sufficient to make sure you pick out all the bits that should be steel or silver. Okay, so jump back in a bit. Once both layers of paint thoroughly dry, it should look a little something like this. The next thing we need to do is shade it. Mummified grime and Lamian Medium for that. Some of you may be wondering why I'm using a dark grey or an off grey instead of leadbelcher, which is a metallic paint for metal areas. I find it lacks depth. So the shiny areas, which will be the first highlight when we get to it, will just accentuate the shadows more, and the shadows shouldn't be reflective anyway, so to have metallic pigment there just throws the eyes off, in my opinion. Makes it look a little less authentic. I don't like to use the term real because it's all fantasy abstract stuff, isn't it? So let's say we're trying to give an impression of metallics rather than realistic metallics. So I've mixed my Speedpaint and Lamian Medium in a 2:3 ratio. And now I'm going to apply it across all those dark grey areas I've painted. I'm not trying to flood the details. It's just going to nicely flow off the brush. On this Storm Bolter, I haven't painted the underside of it, but I'm still going to throw the shade in. Just so it all blends in together. Yeah, you will just about pick it up with your eye if you look close enough. With the shading complete, it's ready to move on to our first highlight, which will be done using a dry brush. So for that, I'll put these aside for a second. You need our texture board and a cheap dry brush. You can buy commercially available brushes labelled as dry brushes, or you can just pick up a cheap makeup brush. The only thing to look out for is to make sure there are plenty of tightly packed bristles. They're nice and soft with plenty of bounce back. After a few uses, you're going to notice the paint's going to clog in these, and they're going to lose that bounce and they're going to lose that softness. That stage, just throw them away. Get a new one. Probably not going to do that with the expensive branded ones though. Take a little dollop of paint. Now, I have designated sort of flat areas. Now, you can buy these texture boards. There's plenty of really good ones out there, some cheaper ones. I had this one made because I knew someone who had a laser engraver, and he was able to cut this into an old piece of plywood. So thoroughly massage the paint into the bristles, fully load that brush, and now take it over to the ridge section. I'm going to rub out as much as we can to about that level. When we're there, just test it on the back of your thumb or something, and not much should come out, if anything, because that's a nice soft surface. Then when we hit a hard surface, like our miniature, that paint's going to come out, and it's going to hit all the raised areas and like any sort of corners it's going to hit. It's going to rub off onto those areas. That's what we're after. So let's give it a go. Now, I'm going to start on the hood, and I'm going to hit the face with this dry brush, but I don't mind because I'll be painting that later. But what I must be careful of is to not hit any of that blue I've painted. Let's give that a go. I try to just do it from one direction, so one stroke, then reset and go again. Anytime you think you're running low on paint in your dry brush, just manipulate a little bit more in. I'm being super careful, so I'm using the tip, the thinnest part of the brush I can now, where it meets the blue. Okay, force it in there, because there's little bits of metal on his face, covering his ear. And with that done, I'm going to go onto his belt buckle. I'm going to try and get in there. Now, because we've got that greyish, brownish tone underneath, it's added a lot of depth to this, but it still looks metallic. And that's why I prefer this method. So yeah, get any of those areas we hit with that base coat and shade. We're not worried about, we are being neat, but we're not too worried about the amount of coverage because we're going to go in with another highlight. So on the crux there, I'm starting at the outer edge and working in. I won't overshoot it then and get anything on that blue. I'm either going to work it into the areas that are nominally black. You'll get a little bit of reflection down there, so the eye would expect to see some metallics. A trick with dry brushing is if you use this technique well and the brush isn't wet with paint, there's only that little bit of residue, you can keep working at it until you get the level of paint on there you want. I'm going to stick them together quickly just to see what effect we've got. Like so. And we can see I think that's quite a natural looking steel colour. It's a bit more gunmetal. It's not as, and we haven't had to use a nasty non-oil gloopy paint to get this effect. This is quite a clean one. It's left all the recesses nice and clear, free of that gunk you get with using Citadel shade. That will, although it's a dry brush, we still want to leave that for a few minutes to thoroughly cure because that resin isn't quite set yet. See you in a few minutes. That leadbelcher dry brush has now fully cured. We're going to go in now and we're going to edge highlight with Stormhost Silver. Now, Stormhost Silver is a layer paint that doesn't react well with water. In fact, none of the metallics from GWD. So you're always going to want to thin with Lamy and medium. What I tend to do is have my silver here, and I'll just have a little drop of medium just off the edge of the palette. Wet the brush. Don't want to add too much medium and thin the paint down to the point of uselessness. Normal tricks that we normally do by this stage you should be used to. We use the back of the thumbnail just to check that coverage of black. That's a little bit thin actually, so thoroughly mix it again. Okay, that's about as good as we're going to get it. You see I've left the miniature assembled. That's because I'm only going to highlight areas I think will be seen from the tabletop. This is a tabletop quality mini, not a display piece. It's still something you want to show off, but don't worry about all the little details. Okay, so starting on that hood, all the way around the edge. Simple, that piece. Then neck armour, we go with the outside edge. We're not going to go all the way into the recesses because they should be shaded, like so. The inner neck armour. And then just a little. I'm just using the side of my brush here, guys. I'm not even using the tip. Right, these spikes I find a bit tricky. What I do is I work at the outside, sort of facing us edges first, because they've got 4 sides. And now I'm going to go to the topmost ones. And move on to the far side, where I'm going to repeat the highlighting process again. Metallic paints also dry on your brush differently to normal layer paint, so you might have to end up washing out your brush a little bit more than you would like. It'll just start getting a bit gloopy, and the paint will start drying on your brush and then stick to the miniature as you're trying to apply it. That's the stage where you want to clean it out thoroughly. Not quite there yet, though. Let's pick out some of the details on his belt. Okay, I'm not worried about, say, there's areas around here I'm not worried about. They look metallic. I'm only worried about these bits you can pick out from about a metre away, maybe. That will look unpainted if I left them in that state. On this shoulder piece crux, it's actually a mounting for a little crystal or diamond, so I'm just going to pick out the base of it, which would have a metallic socket. These little details here. Just edge highlight this storm bolter. I'm not too worried about these hoses. I think they look better dull, because you have silvered, like, decorative elements like these skulls and the flashing, and then you have these functional items that will just get dirty and covered in oil as you go. They'll be less clean, they'll be less shiny, but still metallic. These recesses aren't as well defined as I would like, so I'm going to go in with some neat mummified grime. As in my previous videos, I've taken the mummified grime and I've added water to it to thin it, and this means it acts more like a pin wash and it's easier to clean up. So, tiny amount on my brush. I'm going to pick out all the rivets and recesses, so that crux is a good one. And just panel line with it. So imagine just using a pencil. The paint will flow off nice and easily, so you have to touch it into the recesses and it will flow exactly where you want it to and nowhere else. So these 3 little rivets on this magazine, they'll flow off and around it nicely. Yeah, anywhere where metal meets metal, or the casing of the gun there. Going inside that neck armour, we can define these edges. These voids in the top of the armour. Yeah, I'm not having to clean this up at all. I'm going to let this thoroughly dry, and that's it done. Cool. Well, on the next one, we'll do a bit of bronze armour. Bronze and gold. Oh, I'll see you then.